Hello, my name is Davidge, and I'm a Total Reward and Wellbeing Advisor, as well as a joint founding member with Dr. Judith Grant of the Workplace Wellbeing Practitioners Forum. This podcast is a continuation of the forum's series of interviews, seeking opinions and insights from various experts and practitioners on workplace wellbeing matters of mutual interest. Today, I welcome Nick Pahl, who is CEO of the Society of Occupational Medicine, and we are going to cover the current and future state of occupational health in delivering workplace wellbeing. This is a very timely conversation, as many practitioners will find themselves at the forefront of dealing with the huge occupational health and wellbeing challenges arising from the COVID-19 virus. Before we get into that, however, Nick, could you please give a brief explanation of what SOM does, especially in terms of your wide-ranging influence with government and policymakers?
Yes, thanks, Evan. So the Society of Occupational Medicine is a professional body for occupational health professionals, and we welcome those with a background in occupational health and wellbeing as members. We offer members a journal of occupational medicine, free access to our webinar series, which is currently weekly, also access to insurance and other benefits. We have influence with government and policymakers, helped by our patrons, Lord Blunkett, Sir Norman Lamb and Dame Carol Black. We're currently engaging with the NHS People team about responding in the NHS to the Corona-19 virus, and concerned about certain issues which we're raising with government, and I think we're adding value there, and particularly helping private sector providers support the NHS. We host various forums, the Academic Forum for Researchers. We host an MSK at Work forum for people working in musculoskeletal issues, and we have special interest groups for particular issues, for example, hand-on vibration, well-being group, mental health, etc.
Clearly got a big agenda, as they say.
Yes, it's a big agenda. I mean, I think before COVID struck, we were talking to the Work and Health Unit about their plans to scale up occupational health and improving access by small businesses to occupational health, which includes well-being and preventative aspects for things like mental health, etc.
Okay. Now, as we both know, in fact, everyone knows, COVID-19 is a fast-moving phenomenon. Pandemic is probably a better word. Not a day goes by without some revelation cropping up about the struggles of many national governments to contain the virus. Based on your current experience and involvement with COVID, what do you think is the biggest impact it is having on occupational health professionals?
Yes, well, I think in the NHS, occupational health professionals are struggling with the workload, with people concerned about personal protective equipment and whether they should stay at home or be at work. So there's a huge workload issue there. And also, as things change, should they do immunisation or not, or what should they do about pregnant workers? There's different issues that we're trying to help clarify with and for the government. I mean, for the commercial sector, there's a big drop-off in work, and clearly there's an opportunity for them to support the NHS. People can either volunteer, or there's changes in moving online, having remote consultations. We've got a webinar on that on the 2nd of April about how to carry out remote consultations. So it is having an impact, particularly in the private sector, negatively in terms of work, and I think people in the NHS are really struggling and need our support.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn now to the main theme of this podcast about the current and future state of occupational health in delivering workplace wellbeing. We'll come back to COVID-19 at the end. It's very interesting to see that you released or commissioned the University of East Anglia to undertake academic research into the value of occupational health. This has led to a very comprehensive report being released by SOM at the end of last year. I've read it with great interest, and I've got to say I found it covered something close to my heart on the knowledge, skills and competencies required to introduce workplace health and well-being. So looking at three key questions that came out of the research, I would really welcome your input on them. And the first one is around, is health and work actually different to well-being? I have this conversation all the time with different people.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think well-being programs may extend outside health at work issues. But if there is a difference, it is blurred. So, for example, we know sleep is a big driver of health, but there's certain responsibilities that both employees and employers have for sleep at work, and well, it's not sleep at work, but just sleep generally. So that's an example of blurring. And there's also different legislation from Health and Safety at Work Act, Equality Act, Diversity Act, Employment Law, that adds to that complexity. But clearly, wellbeing's got an important role in terms of prevention, and if there's targeted evidence-based programs, then it works very well with occupational health and strategies, for example, for mental health at work.
Yeah, I mean, certainly some of the research I've been involved with is it talks more about organisational well-being. So I suppose it's saying if you've got a healthy workforce, you've got a healthy organisation where you're getting, if you like, optimal productivity and growth. Is this something you would agree to or agree with?
Well, yes. I mean, I think there's good evidence base in terms of occupational health and return on investment. We've produced various reports on that. It's the first one back in 2017 on the value of occupational health and its impact on workplace health. So some people talk about a 4-to-1 return on investment. Sometimes it's even better than that, particularly for ergonomic interventions. And we also produced a report in 2018 on the value of occupational health globally with International SOS. So we know there's a return on investment. I think well-being needs to work harder to show its evidence base, and there needs to be targeted studies to look at that, comparing what intervention works against others. But certainly we feel there's an opportunity, and companies are interested to invest in well-being to retain and recruit into their workforce.
Okay, so looking at the second question, and this is quite a topical issue as well, is around who actually owns well-being in an organisation, as opposed to who should be owning well-being. That makes sense.
Well, currently, who owns well-being in an organisation? It might be a sort of champion from someone at perhaps not a senior level. Although I'm a member of the Leadership Council following the Farmer-Stevenson Review on mental health in the workplace, and here there are CEOs who do own well-being and its impact on mental health. So in terms of who owns it, it could be an individual champion, it could be a line manager, it could be occupational health, it could be HR. But what's important is that someone sponsoring or leading it really from as senior level as possible, working with HR, occupational health, the EAP providers, a whole sort of range of people to support leaders and managers to implement well-being. I think unless you get that culture change in the organisation, no one individual can do it. It has to be that change, and that requires leadership at the highest level.
The issue, of course, with line managers is that many of them defer to HR when it comes to health and well-being, or obviously more on the health and safety side with occupational health. Do you see this as an abrogation of responsibility, or do you think that line managers are pivotal, if you like, to developing a well-being culture within an organisation?
Yes, I think line managers are absolutely critical. I mean, they may feel they've got enough on their plate, and I think a recent survey by CIPD showed that middle managers just feel that they are squeezed and got pressures on both from above and
absolutely
below. But actually, managers ideally should, if you're managing properly, take responsibility and see that they are, the key driver for the people they're responsible for, and actually delegating that to HR will have detrimental effects. So as much as line managers might not like the extra responsibility or recognition that is their responsibility and how powerful and important they are, it is the line manager's role to support well-being and work with people they manage to do.
Yeah. But the common issue with the squeezed middle, as they call it, is that they're probably the most vulnerable group, subject to stress and perhaps mental health issues. It's quite clear to me, and I see this from many commentators, that they do need training and they do need the requisite support. With perhaps HR and OH sitting in the background facilitating that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the report talks about management capabilities, and research shows that good and supportive relationships between workers and a line manager is strongly associated with health and well-being outcomes, and they've got a key influence on how work is performed, and they need to clarify role expectations, delegate authority, and sort of role model too. Which is obviously hard at the moment with COVID, but I think people need to reach out and do regular one-to-ones and team meets and role model. And I think training for managers is cost-effective and has multiplier effects. People like HSE and CIBD are producing guidance on leadership competences, and there's training for managers. We're working with the business and the community on
that. Okay. Final question on this section. What needs to be done about well-being? How do we leverage it?
Well, it's a confused marketplace, isn't it, of different providers, and I think those providers and people buying it need to be clear on what they're buying, what impact it will have, and evaluate, and if it doesn't work, then try other techniques. So I think then there are some concerns about business case for this. There needs to be further research on return on investment. And there needs to be a focus on implementing and sustaining workplace wellbeing initiatives that are evidence-based. We really need to work along the lines that occupational health practitioners do in terms of looking at the health surveillance and the health issues, and then working from there and in a targeted approach, not just a kind of pet scheme.
Yeah, we'll come back to the business case a little later, but certainly one of my observations is, as you put it in your report, the confused marketplace, because we know that any practitioner tasked with developing a workplace wellbeing strategy, it is a daunting experience. I know that from talking to clients all the time. So, apart from the, if you want to call it, the myriad of demands from internal stakeholders, you're then at the mercy of a well-being market, which is offering you just about every solution you need, often promising instant results, if you like. So in order to separate the wood for the trees, it was good to see that your report highlighted 5 ways to workplace well-being. I just wonder if we could just unpack those and look at them in a bit more detail. I think the first one we kind of touched on already, which is around improving management and leadership capabilities. I don't think we need to say a lot more about that, unless, other than the fact that it requires what I call a more humanistic approach by leadership now than in the past. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, but I'm pleased to have highlighted that first, because I think that is the most important driver. Certainly the research says that. The 5 ways of workforce well-being are those management capabilities, support for workers, improving job quality, and enhancing social relationships at work, and workplace health promotion.
We could probably cover that. We could probably cover that separately, but I think as long as we kind of highlight at this stage, as we said, management leadership capabilities is a given. We talk about improving, or you talk about improving job quality, around clear purpose, meaning, etc. Enhancing social relationships is become kind of like the vogue recently, because I think there's appreciation that most people spend their lives at work, and it fulfills a fundamental human need, if you like, for friendship and interaction, this type of thing. And of course, the big thing as well is diversity and inclusion. No one should feel excluded because of their particular background or orientation. And I think that's been an issue, or still is an issue for many organisations. But it'd be interesting to touch on the last one, which is around the leveraging workplace health and wellbeing promotions.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think workplace health promotion looks to change health behaviour, and there's mixed evidence in this area regarding their effectiveness and the ways in which initiatives can be implemented can influence their effectiveness. So I was on a call with the Wellcome Trust, a big research funder this week, with Mind, the mental health charity, just about the needing to improve evidence and research for mental health at work. And, we know that there's mental health first aid training, there's line manager training. We just don't know, what is the best way to, what is a targeted intervention that could work. I think occupational health and wellbeing professionals are well placed to implement different strategies and compare and contrast. And what works for, someone working in oil rig is obviously different from someone. Important is that there's, in the first instance, good information and support from leadership, as I said, to implement wellbeing.
Yeah. I mean, certainly my experience shows that with health promotion, there needs to be a clear vision and goals, needs to be linked to the core values of the organisation. And as you said earlier, it's around targeted interventions. It's looking at the preventative approach, rather than being reactive, being more proactive.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, I think the report talks about some of the barriers to implementing wellbeing programs. And clearly, you can't do anything if you haven't got a significant budget or resources or management interest. And it needs to be clear about also what the benefits of the initiative is, and people present a business case. And I suppose our value of occupational health documents aim to help with those business cases, and as does this report launched last December. Value of occupational health to workplace wellbeing.
Yeah. I mean, the report does say, I think there are three main barriers, and I find this common with all potential clients I talk to. One is lack of budget. The second one is lack of resources, because they're already fully stretched in other programs. And the third one is trying to attract management interest in terms of convincing them that it's, if you want to call it, a business imperative as opposed to an HR or OH initiative. And I think the report brings that out very clearly.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I think, there's different programs, isn't there? Mindfulness, physical activity, management training, health-related behaviors, kind of cultural transformation, job design. And I think, some of them cost, others don't cost anything. I mean, just doing, a good job design, that doesn't cost anything. It just requires that reflection of what a good job is.
Yeah, the issue with all these various initiatives like mindfulness, fun days, bringing fresh fruit in and everything, is that if you haven't got an overarching framework, they're seen as very disjointed and fragmented, and people don't sort of get the big picture, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I suppose, again, that's where occupational health comes in, because they've got that knowledge of health and well-being, evidenced by academic professional qualifications, and I think that gives it credibility for people to take it on, even when the return on investment isn't that clear. And it is a challenge, isn't it, to make a compelling and rigorous kind of business case for it. But before COVID hit, there was definitely demand for workplace health initiatives. People that want to invest in it, and perhaps even more so after COVID, people find returning to work difficult. They've had mental health challenges. So I would like to see that as we come to normality sooner or later, that workplace wellbeing will continue to be a really important area of focus for businesses.
Yeah. Okay, great. So finally, turning to the end of your report, it very much looks at the future of the OH profession, which, as you just said, may have been turned on its head in the current crisis. So what do you think should be the main areas of focus, particularly, let's say, in this decade?
I suppose in the short term, going back to normal after COVID, there's going to be some difficulties for the commercial sector, and they will have to kind of reinvent themselves and use telephone counselling more, but also hopefully government will invest in this area. So we'd like to see that expansion of occupational health. Currently it's covering 50% of the workplace, and we need to see that increasing close to universal access to occupational health. There are professional standards. You've been very helpful for creating the code of practice for wellbeing practitioners, and we've done some work on occupational health technicians and their escalation and supervision criteria, and also NMC looking at the tier 3 SCIF and register for nurses. There really needs to be that investment in training up people, be it through apprenticeships or training doctors and nurses through university courses. So I think there's that kind of capacity issue of occupational health, but in terms of the workplace, like you say, I like that word humanistic. People need to have a workplace that is humanistic. People entering the workplace will demand that. They'll be looking for authentic leaders and businesses that have those values. But also people looking a lot for the workplace in terms of their personal well-being, and that boundary will be blurred with technology, and so things like sleep and switching off. And I would like to see the government investing, doing more legislation in this area to support the scale up. So I think work will change, occupational health will change too, to reflect the technology and how the workplace is changing. I'd like to see further investment, and the government certainly is planning a green paper on work as everyone's business, and there'll be tax benefits I'd hope for this area. And then person to now, there's this crisis management role, with COVID, and how occupational health can help with those decisions of who's at work, who stays at home, how businesses continue through a crisis, and if there's a health issue, that's where occupational health is best.
Yeah, it's a massive shock for business continuity, but I think if you look at it on the flip side, I think there will be some very important lessons that will be taken forward in terms of making organizations more resilient and agile and able to survive, which is not the case at the moment.
Yes, sadly, some businesses will go to ground, and occupational health businesses too. So, I think occupational health and wellbeing services need to reflect on their own business continuity and their business model. But, I am positive. Yeah. I think, we got a huge role to play to get universal access to occupational health, to get well-being to be that preventative driver to ensure organizations have the culture that supports people's health and well-being. And people at the moment clearly thinking about their mental health and well-being, staying at home, working at home, and perhaps there's greater awareness now that we had 10 years ago, and I think that will only continue in the future.
I think we all agree that the nature of work is going to change in the future. I think it needed something like this to, if you like, put to bed some very outdated attitudes towards, if you want to call it, remote working, flexible working.
Yes, but I think an overall sort of key message is the kind of return on investment, and I think we need to keep building that case, particularly for well-being. I think the case for occupational health is pretty clear, so we need to keep building the evidence and learning about what works and what doesn't work, and occupational health practitioners want to be a big part of that. So, I'd encourage people listening to this podcast to implement well-being initiatives that are evidence-based, look at the data, that they're led in a way that people can learn, and then find out what works and what doesn't work.
Okay. One more question from me, Nick. What final tips would you offer to occupational health and other professionals engaged in workplace health and wellbeing? Appreciate it's a very broad question, open question. Are there 3 or 4 things that you could just state, would be important?
I think in this area, I think it's about being clear what the offer is, building the business case. So being clear on the return investment for the business, skilling up so you have the right professional skills to deliver that. And also, I think just acquiring that evidence, isn't it, and making sure that we can build that case for the future. And I think this is where we are with wellbeing, is strategically research and evidence building drives change. And I would encourage people to, we have a journal, publish just even small cases or some research in this area, link up with your local university and build this business case. Because I think wellbeing is here to stay, but it'll be much more effective if people are able to demonstrate what it does and publish what it does. So as much as it might feel a challenge to publish or kind of do research, if you're research minded, we can help and encourage you to do that.
Okay. So just to conclude the podcast, if anyone wants to be involved with SOM, what would be the best course of action for them to take?
Yes, well, we'd love everyone listening to this podcast to become a member, join our wellbeing group, get involved in our governance, our board and council, and we welcome volunteers to help on specific bits of work. If the membership, full membership is too much, then there's an associate membership. And also we welcome wellbeing practitioners from around the world. We've got a lively international group. So join us as a member, or come along to our conference, which is it's postponed now to October. Come along and meet us all there, or just get in touch.
Okay.
My email is nick.pahl, Pahl, @som.org.uk. And thanks for listening, and thanks for inviting me. It's a good topic, and thanks for your help supporting that code of practice.
Nick Pahl, CEO of Society of Occupational Medicine, thank you very much for engaging in this podcast.